Antiretroviral drugs are used to treat infection by retroviruses, primarily HIV. There are different levels of antiretroviral treatment. First-line ART, which are the initial drugs prescribed for a patient when he or she fulfills the national clinical and laboratory criteria to start ART treatment. Second-line ART come after first-line fails. And third-line ART, which is used in the treatment of HIV after second-line treatment fails. In Kenya today, just like most African countries, third-line ARVs are not available. Most patients requiring third-line are treated by salvage therapy. Salvage therapy is a form of treatment given after an ailment does not respond to standard treatment. There are 29 different ARVs available today. Kenya can only access 8 of these. The 8 being for first, second, and third-line ARVs.
Jambo, jambo bana, habari gani, nzuri sana, wageni, wakaribishwa, Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.
Here at Nyumbani Children's Home, 2 out of its over 3,000 children are currently on the salvage therapy.
I'm not a scientist. I am caring for children. They're like my children. And it breaks my heart to know that 2 of our children in Leototo are failing second line, and I don't want to hear that they have died.
The World Health Organization guidelines released in November 2009 recommend initiating ARVs earlier.
The failure in the treatment can come from several reasons. One of them is adherence, and another would be suboptimal prescription. Another is blind prescription. You see, in the developed world, before a person goes on ART, they have a resistance test done. And so it can be identified whether they have inherited a virus which has already developed resistance to some of the ARVs.
The third-line treatment, which is presently non-existent, will also be introduced in the country. But to implement this, the country needs to raise an additional 7 billion shillings over the next 4 years to boost its budget for antiretroviral drugs.
It's an inevitable step because obviously there must be some people within second-line treatment that obviously fail. I will need to have an option for them. So that the WHO is leading the discussion. I know just a Kenyan issue, is a regional issue. And WHO is giving guidance in terms of how we need to manage that line treatment for HIV.
Even as the government weighs its best possible options to implement these recommendations, for Sister Mary, this cannot wait.
To my great sadness, when I got the national guidelines which were revised on the 15th of July 2010, there is no reference to third line. But I don't want a time to come when I would have to talk to one of our young people and tell them that, sadly, I've been told by our paediatrician that you're failing second line. We don't have drugs available here in Kenya. They are available in the developed world, but not here. So I'm afraid we can do no more for you. Okay. So how could you tell a child that or a young person that?
Although available in the first world countries, most developing countries cannot access third-line drugs, with a single dose going for over 1 million Kenya shillings a year.
We need donor assistance. We get drugs through the PEPFAR program for first and second line for all our children who need antiretroviral medication. I believe I could get access to third line if the national guidelines allowed for third line ART.
What we have just issued now, we just issued new guidelines for first line treatment because we are changing also the treatment. One, looking at when people start treatment, they're not going to start treatment earlier at 350, CD4 levels of 350. So that is this coming. So we're just issuing new guidelines. We're hoping the next 2 or 3 months we'll be able to finalize the management of second line and third line.
The question is, when will these guidelines be put in place? And while this debate goes on, at Nyumbani Children's Home, 2 boys, 15 and 3 years old, are currently on salvage therapy, and 6,000 other patients who are on second-line treatment in Kenya can only hope and wait.
Kwa vile dawa hizo za kumanu hazinitibu, najisikia vibaya. Ningependa nichanjiwe dawa.
Kukosa venye nasikia kwa second line na venye kulingana naona mwili yake ikiendelea na venye niliambiwa anafaa kwanza sasa third line, nasikia nikishtuka juu na ninaona kama life yake sahi iko in danger, but I hope akianza the third line there's hope.
We are doing our level best to sustain the current funding and also to explore and look for new opportunities. We have evidence that putting people on treatment is of course effective, because then you avoid risk of other infections, particularly opportunistic infections that keep people from HIV from working.
According to a new research by Medical Sans Frontiers, patients with HIV on second-line ARV treatment are significantly more likely to experience treatment failure than those on first-line treatment.
I believe that this is a global problem. It's not just our own problem here or in any other country in Africa or anywhere else in the world, but I believe it's a global problem, and that the world needs to rally around to make available this medicine. It's a right, I believe, to healthcare.
But Dr. Muraguri says that there's no need for alarm.
We can more than confirm that and reassure everybody that the national program is able to respond to the current needs, and people need to come forward and access services. And the key to this is basically people knowing their HIV status.
Even though the government has made tremendous steps in treatment of HIV and AIDS, including increments in budgetary allocations to 900 million shillings, the allocation covers just over 1% of the estimated 7.6 billion Kenya shillings gap in funding. With such huge costs, should governments invest in patients that have failed on 2 other stages of treatment?
If the fact of the moral issue doesn't move the world, then another issue is that we will develop a very resistant virus here, which we will pass around the world, because we're now dealing with the situation of a global village, not individual continents which are not in contact.
The numbers of patients on second line may be small now, and the chances of developing a more resistant virus may seem slim, according to Owens. But it's indeed an issue that needs to be addressed sooner. Reporting for Hope Beyond, I'm Violet Otindo.